Good morning. Welcome to this circle. This circle where we gather as spiritual community in a circle because there's always room to expand the circle. There's always room for more. There's always a way to include another, a way to make and keep space between us and with each other. And whether this is the first time you've taken your place in this circle or you haven't taken your place in this circle for some time, or you come to this circle and take your place as often as you can, or whether you take your place in this circle by joining us online, we each have a place in this spiritual community. We are part of the family. We form this day to nurture our spirits and to challenge us to live in ways that are more whole and more loving. And so we sing our way into community. As we welcome each other to take our place, I invite you to complete my thought with the words you find before you on the screen. No matter who we are, no matter... You have your part, and you're ready. No matter who we are, what we've done, what we have failed to do. And whether we're single, partnered, or in between. Whether we're old or young or in between. Whether our skin is yellow or red or black or brown or shades between. Whether we are on top of the world today or we feel we're hitting rock bottom. Whether our spirits are soaring or we're deeply sad. Whatever it is we think or believe or want to believe or can't bring ourselves to believe. In this circle of spiritual community, when we come together like this, we bring our deepest fears and our highest hopes, which is to say, we pray. And I invite us to pray together, offering the words before us. We pause amid the delights and demands of life to consider how we're living. Into this circle, we come to examine our priorities and regain perspective. We take this time to focus and reinvest ourselves in living the values we cherish most deeply. May we be inspired by our growing awareness of ourselves and our world, inspired by the insight we find all around us. May we open ourselves to reverence, finding wisdom and courage to live with respect, integrity, compassion. May it be so. When we gather here, we are each teachers and learners. Some who have been gathering over the month of August with Chris as he's returned from sabbatical have been learning some of the music that he created during his sabbatical time. In this space of being between getting here and being here, we sing together. I'll invite us first to hear the melody, and then those of you who have been learning it over these past few weeks, help us into singing with one another. When we gather around light, that which is a symbol of the quest for spirit in all the enduring religious traditions of the world. We gather in the light of a new day. We gather in the midst of those flickers of light that give us a sense of who we are and where we are. We gather in the presence of the shadows that threaten our world, our way of being, that threaten justice, peace, wholeness. And we gather, placing this light in our midst and gathering in its midst, to acknowledge that we are born into light and yet we are ever seeking it. We come to this time and to this place to find light for our journey, to find it in the ancient stories of our tradition, to find it in our experiences, in the wisdom that comes from the natural world, wisdom we find in so many places and in all people. So we pause now in this light to open ourselves to the gift of being here. I'd like to invite our children, some of our leaders in Kid Spirit, some of the young in heart to come and join me here on our carpet. Hi, everybody. How are you? It's back to school time. It's back to getting up early, getting out the door, having things to do. And it's a time of the year, too, where sometimes we can feel a little bit like that guy. You know, where it feels like everybody knows what to do except us, and everybody fits in except us, and everybody belongs, and they're all part of the group, and there we are, kind of standing out, not quite sure how to get with everybody else and feeling like we don't quite fit. Or maybe we feel like these guys. The guy on the end has something to say. He says, "Hey guys, a longer stick would be nice." I think we all know what it's like to be the person that feels on the outside, and everybody else seems to feel like they're on the inside. You know, when you're the last person to get picked for a team, or it feels like nobody wants to be in your group, and you feel like this little girl who's sitting on the end of the bench all alone, and everybody else is together. Last year, our youth thought a lot about what it is to belong. And they did a really wonderful video that teaches us a whole lot about how to help each other feel like we belong. So this was a video called Belonging, A Sock's Tale. And some of the creators of it are in the room here today. I can see several of you sitting in back rows here, who did this very wonderful video that we want to share today. And here's what some of our youth would teach us about belonging. It says, "Belonging, a sock's tale."
Toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me. So happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together.
Don't miss this. Thank you, Youth Cafe. And it makes me think, every time we do laundry, we end up with 2 socks that don't seem to go together. But maybe we could remind ourselves about belonging if we just wore those 2 socks that didn't match. And realize we don't have to look like everybody else, we don't have to act like everybody else, we don't have to do things exactly the same way. We all help each other belong. Today's a new season in Kids Spirit, and it's a chance for us to each help each other belong, to make sure that everybody has a place and that everybody feels welcome. So we all take our part in doing that. And after Kids Spirit today, we have a really sweet time coming. We will meet you either at the very sweet table of making sundaes, or we'll meet you at the very sweet cotton candy station, or we'll meet you at the very sweet popcorn station. So today, what's that? Oh, yeah. And then after you've had all your sugar, you want to go outside because there's a bouncy castle where you can work it all off. So a chance to jump with that, with all that sweet stuff.
All of my energy out.
No, not all of it. You have to keep some of it. You're right.
'Cause I have to play hockey later.
Right. So save some for hockey and just spend a little in the bouncy castle. So today, young people who are in the room, Youth Cafe begins again downstairs in the Youth Lounge, and Kids Spirit takes its place in the small hall, and we'll see you soon.
built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home. Seeds. There is a tree as old as me. Branches were sold by the color of green. Ground had rose then past its knees. By the cracks of his skin I climbed to the top. I climbed the tree to see the world. When the guys came around to blow me down, held on as tightly as you held on to me. Held on as tightly as you held on.
This is a reading from an early Jewish Christian community. It's a story about Jesus of Nazareth that we hear only in the Gospel of Luke, most likely written sometime in the last third of the 1st century. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector, and he was very rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he couldn't because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed into a sycamore tree to see Jesus because he'd heard Jesus was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to that place, he looked up to him and he said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down, and Zacchaeus was happy to welcome him. And all who saw it began to grumble and said, "Look at that, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a thief." Zacchaeus stood there and said to Jesus, "Look, half of my possessions I'll give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much as I owe." And Jesus said to him, "Today wholeness has come to your house, because you too are a son of Abraham and Sarah. I have come in search of those who are lost." This is a story about Jesus of Nazareth passed down to us from the 1st century. Every September evokes for me the memory of stepping onto the campus at Dalhousie University, standing in the doorway of the administration building, feeling utterly overwhelmed, not even knowing which line to stand in, what questions to ask, how to register for a course, let alone find the classroom it's going to be held in. And it felt remarkably like 12 years earlier, on the very first day of school, except that that day I could count on my mother to negotiate the new and the unknown for me. And somehow I think those are experiences we've all had. We feel like we're the only one that doesn't know what to do. We're the only one that doesn't know where to go. Somehow everybody knows something we don't know, or we just don't belong here because we're the only one that doesn't fit. Whether it's school or a new job or an interview or an appointment, a meeting, a party, a new organization, or even walking into a spiritual community like this for the first time. I suspect we all know that deep loneliness and the uncertainty of navigating the new and the unfamiliar. In a much larger way, we're confronted this September by the plight of millions of the world's people who are searching for a place to belong, who are searching for refuge and safety, who are seeking sanctuary from hunger or drought or war or violence or poverty, disease, intolerance, cruelty, prejudice. The migration of so many of the world's peoples from Syria and Libya and the Congo and Iraq and Nigeria and South Sudan, and the list goes on and on. The flight of so many millions has sharpened our awareness of the realities of so many of the world's people who, for any number of reasons, can no longer be at home in their own homeland. Desperation and courage drive the search for food and for shelter and for a safe place to belong. For those of us who are only a few generations from our migrant past, we can only begin to imagine the loneliness and the fear that accompanies a deep hope of finding a welcome somewhere that will enable you to begin a new and a more secure life. Into our contemporary personal and social and global quests for belonging comes the wisdom of an ancient story we heard a moment ago. The movie version of that first century story would have to cast Danny DeVito in the lead role as Zacchaeus, wouldn't it? Playing the sawed-off little social disaster with the overweight bank account. And maybe you can help me. I mean, who would play the perfect Jewish mother, Mrs. Zacchaeus? Judi Dench. Somehow it seems to me that Mrs. Zacchaeus is the only sympathetic character in the story. Just imagine the look on her face when her husband arrives home unannounced with Jesus and a dozen of his closest friends that he's just invited for dinner. What's an honor for her husband is an obligation for her. How is she going to feed all these hungry guys who turn up uninvited on her doorstep? And it's not likely they entertained very often. While everyone in Jericho knows her husband, it's not because he was popular, it's because he was notorious. He was a highly successful bureaucrat in the most corrupt system in Roman-occupied Palestine. To have become wealthy as a Roman-employed tax collector means that he had to have been extremely successful at raising his own salary. By overcharging his fellow citizens not only the tax he had to collect for the emperor and the little payoff he had to skim for his superiors, and then, of course, a little to line his own pockets. Honesty and integrity were not exactly in the skill set that any headhunter who was recruiting tax collectors was looking for. And Zacchaeus must have been better at his job than most because he had acquired the rank of chief tax collector. And he had managed to be a poorly paid civil servant who had gotten disgustingly rich. He had everything, but he was looking for something. He was desperately rich and terribly alone. He must have heard some things about that Galilean peasant from Nazareth who was drawing crowds around the country. Maybe Matthew, the tax collector who had become one of the itinerants traveling with Jesus, maybe Matthew had been one of his employees. Maybe everyone was still talking about the day that Matthew left the tax office for lunch and never came back. That he abandoned the emperor's payroll, left a secure job to hang out with this prophet and his friends from the fishing industry. For whatever reason, and the story doesn't tell us, Zacchaeus needed to satisfy his curiosity. Maybe if he saw with his own eyes, maybe he could understand why Matthew would walk away from a lucrative living to be in the company of some poor peasant preacher who didn't have a pot to pee in. So the story has Zacchaeus running ahead as if he's on a reconnaissance mission, ever the schemer, looking for a way to see without being seen. And at 5 feet tall with your sandals on, that's a pretty tall order. But the crook in him hadn't entirely displaced the boy in him. And he found a way to be both behind and above the crowd. This sawed-off shyster skimmied up a sycamore tree to see what he could see. I don't know about you, but I can't really remember the last time I saw a bureaucrat scrambling up a telephone pole for a front row seat. And then as the story goes, for in longer than he could remember, someone looked up at him. Someone looked up to him. Someone called him by the name his mother and father gave him. Someone spoke directly to him. Someone said they needed to be in his company. I can only imagine what the crowd was anticipating. You could see them like rubbing their hands together, waiting for Jesus to rant about the corrupt conspiracy and the evils of collaborating with the Roman authorities. And you could have seen them waiting for the outrage Jesus was quick to express against the inequities that were robbing people of their land and taking their bread and their hope. They had to have been hoping for a display of indignation like they would witness in him against the temple authorities who were also ripping people off. They had to have been expecting Zacchaeus to have been humiliated. That Jesus would give this bloody crook a piece of his mind and knock him down a few pegs. But instead of calling him names, Jesus speaks his birth name and invites himself to his home. Can we really be hearing what the story seems to have him saying? I must stay at your house today. I must spend time with you. I need to talk to you. I need to put my feet under your table. I need to sleep under your roof. I need your hospitality. I need to go home with you. Of all the places Jesus could stay in Jericho, of all the good people he could hang out with, why in the world does the story have him go home with this crook? And they hadn't even made it across the threshold of Zacchaeus' house. When unprompted, he says, I got too much stuff. I'm going to give half of it away. And the stuff that I came by dishonestly, the stuff that I acquired by exploiting others, the stuff that I've gotten by using my power to intimidate and to extort, I'm going to make restitution to those I've hurt. In an attempt to make amends, he would redistribute 50% of what he had. And in addition, he would repay on a ratio of 4-to-1 what he'd wrongfully taken. And he wasn't shamed or blamed into doing any of this. It was his response to the holy hospitality he had experienced in Jesus of Nazareth. It was his response to relationship that was mutual and respectful. It was his response to someone who treated him with dignity and acceptance, someone who sought relationship with him. And I suspect it wasn't just Zacchaeus who was changed by that genuine human encounter. After all, the story says it was Jesus who had need of Zacchaeus, not the other way around. Why did Jesus need to be with this guy? Talk to this guy? Put himself in a position of receiving hospitality from one who embodied the very ethic and evils of a system Jesus sought to challenge and dismantle? Is it not the same need we have to have conversations with those with whom we disagree, those who see and experience the world differently than we do? Is it not the same need we have to build relationships with those who are the face of the structures we resist and the values we refuse and the systems we seek to change? Is it not the same need we have to be in the company of those we fear, those we label, those we don't understand, those whose actions in some ways seem inexplicable to us? There is something about someone calling us by name, by the name our mother or father, grandparent, guardian, the name we were given at birth. There's something about having our name spoken with love and openness rather than with judgment and disdain. There's something about being noticed and treated with dignity and respect, no matter who we are or what we've done or what we have failed to do. There's something about being welcomed, about being invited into relationship, about someone wanting to be in our company, even needing to be in our company. In the world of this story, it was a life-changing encounter for Zacchaeus and for Jesus. Jesus was received as an honored guest in the home of a man most first-century Jews would not have entered. How could Jesus not have been changed by that experience? In this simple exchange of common humanity, Zacchaeus was named as a beloved child of Abraham and Sarah, as one who belonged in the community of ancient Israel, despite the harm he had done to many members of that community. As one invited to take his place and participate in the common good with justice and with compassion. In this space where each invited the other to be in conversation, to belong at the table, wholeness came, not only to Zacchaeus and his household, but undoubtedly to Jesus and his community who had taken their place in that home. It's easy for our hearts to become hard, to become small and narrow. It's easy to harden into opinions and ideas. Injustice and inequity count on doing everything possible to keep us from putting our feet under the same table. Obsessions with security and borders, making us quick to label one another and fear one another, all of that counts on keeping us isolated from having conversations in which we would discover our common humanity, our common aspirations and fears. We stand in a time as a global community that invites us to acknowledge and know our need of one another in our country, in our communities of faith, in our families, in our cities. To know our need for the one who seeks refuge in our home, in our country, in the circle of spiritual community. A time that invites us to know our need to belong, and that we will never belong until we all belong. Isn't that the great wisdom of the best of our teachers? Isn't that the wisdom of Jesus of Nazareth in saying to someone like Zacchaeus, I need to come to your house today? Isn't that the wisdom of our Aboriginal brothers and sisters who teach us that we belong to the earth and we belong to each other as all my relations? And isn't that the great wisdom of the teaching of our African brothers and sisters in Ubuntu, that I am because you are? So how can I be if you cannot be? How can I have a place if you have no place? This is our time to pause and consider these questions. Consider what it is we might do to make hospitality a habit in our hearts, a habit in our country, a habit in our communities like this, spiritual communities of all kinds and places. How we might resist the fear and ignorance that keeps us from expressing our need of one another. A time to ask ourselves in silence, in the silence we hold with each other, what does our need to belong require of us? Friends, we go with the light of love within us. We go to draw the circle of belonging ever wider with our love and our care, to build the beloved community of which Jesus and so many before and after him dreamed. That community that cares for its most vulnerable, that community that accepts and affirms the right of all to be and to belong. We go together that it may be so. We go to draw the circle wider.